Okay, day. Let's go. We are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am Theology Matters, and I am joined by, and again, wrong way, Just a Catholic once again. We are combining forces. Politics and theology meet tonight as we discuss a great question: can America be saved by Protestantism? So, I'd like to welcome everyone to the channel. If you could hit that big red button for us, it should say subscribe, and please give us a thumbs up. If you're going to give us a thumbs down, at least give us a comment why. And so yeah, before we go anywhere else, I'm gonna let Just a Catholic give his channel spiel, and then give a reason why you feel like you're capable of answering this question.
Yeah, so I think anybody who'd watch your videos know me by now, to be honest. But you call me Javi from Just a Catholic, and I think that I'm qualified to speak on this because um I am a philosophy and religious studies major at Southern Methodist University. I'm in my last year of studies, and so I've had quite a bit of experience speaking with and learning under Protestant scholars in particular. I also edit videos for the School of Theology, the master's program at my university, and I'm also just generally um, a theology person. That's what I do. That's what I study, and I'm also, of course, I'm in Dallas, Texas, which is basically Baptist land, and so I think between all of those things, I'm at least more informed than your average person.
Excellent. Yes. So, hi, Just a Catholic's audience, because my people haven't shown up just yet. But I am Eli Richard. I'm also known as Theology Matters. And for my people of District 6 in Oklahoma, I am the anomaly. So, I run the Theology Matters channel. I do some gaming here and there. Currently just doing Magic, hopefully doing Destiny Monday. But I do a lot of political commentary about different things that go on. I definitely have a different take than some of the traditional conservative pundits because I just think, and that's my crime. But I also, as well with Javi, I live in Baptist land in Oklahoma, so Baptist stronghold. But yeah, while as I kind of alluded to, well, Javi is able to answer the theological side. I'm more of in the political realm, so I feel like that kind of gives me a avenue to answer this question. Um, I'm also a convert to the faith of about 5 years now, so but yeah, other than that, I think that's really it. I'm a aerospace and mechanical engineer by degree, so definitely out of my wheelhouse a
I
bit.
forgot that.
But yeah, so yeah. But other than that, I think that's it. Yeah, the channel's pretty simply just politics. Because as I always like to say, I talk a lot of smack about us fighting for our culture. I know Javier is Gen Z just like myself, and so we obviously were handed a hand of that the world has given us, and so I believe that we need to fight um, back for what's ours, and so hence why I push myself into the arena, because if I'm going to tell y'all to, got to do it myself. But yeah, so that is it of spiel. So I'm gonna let everyone. So I'm gonna tell the story then, if that's okay with you, Javi. So so this started out last. Gosh, was it last week? It was a week or two ago. Um, I did a live stream, and Javi asked me if I was gonna have anyone on, and then we chatted a bit back and forth, and then I told him my ideas for this video. And so he was intrigued, and so we joined forces because I more or less shifting over. I see this on Twitter quite a bit, and let me move to the actual there. we see this on Twitter where many evangelical Protestants try to admit at some point that America needs to be a Protestant nation because it was, and that it needs to return or something of that ilk. This is Joel. I sent Lizzie to him, but this is Joel. Then Smash Balls does his own, and how it will Rome is never going to take over the church. I mean, Rome is never going to take over America, even though there's been a lot of conversions. And so we kind of get into this, the fact that Rome or Catholicism is obviously hindered in America because of some of the Protestants that are here. And while we appreciate the Protestants, there are some times that some of the avocation that they wish for is not exactly wise. That's where 2,000 years of church history come into clutch. And so that's basically the reasoning for the questioning is, hey, can Protestantism actually save America if they believe this, because it is down in this degenerate path? And so that is what we hope to answer today. We have, we're the timeline at least. We're going to give kind of a brief beginning history of the faiths in America. We're going to go and talk about transgenderism, homosexuality. What else is there? Hold on. Feminism and Zionism. Those are like the four things, but there are many other things in between, like feminism and homosexuality. So we're going to go into all of that. But I'm going to leave it open to Javi to start with your precursor that you have about how we really should be defining Protestantism, or how there is different Protestantism, more or less.
Yeah, so I want to start by saying that I really do love Protestants as people. I'm not gonna. I don't want to just be an enemy, because we are brothers in Christ, and actually the movement to trying to revitalize old Protestant traditions, because they're trying to fight for what they believe to be the best and what they believe to be true. And so I really do respect that. And so I just want to reiterate that. I think it's really important that we be kind to each other and we be charitable. In this discussion, we are responding to an idea that's going around, and we're just giving our take on it. And I do believe that Catholicism is the true form of Christianity, but again, out of love. And to all my Protestant friends who may be watching this, if I would hope that we can remain charitable and not following it himself. But I do think that there are certain distinctions that need to be made, because when you say Protestantism, it needs to be an explicitly Protestant country. There's really two camps that come into this, because modern evangelicalism only really is maybe 200 years old, if that. Many forms of it and many schools of evangelical thought are actually were promulgated in like the mid to late 20th century. And so we have to be careful about that, because whenever we think about that return to form, there is the mainline Protestants, and then there is like evangelicalism. And I like to distinguish between the two of them. Both I and Redeemed Zoomer agree on. We have a video on that if you'd like to look at it. But so I think that we need to distinguish between the two of them and kind of discuss why both of them wouldn't be able to save America. And so I guess as we go along through all these topics, I'll bring up some of the problems with both sides of that aisle.
Okay, good. And by both, you mean mainline and evangelicalism, not Protestantism and Catholicism will fail, right?
No, mainline and evangelicalism.
Okay. Just making sure. Okay, and so that's your precursor then, because because you were informing me about that, and while I'm doing this research, that I was picking stuff out, I kept seeing this pop up, and so I kept thinking about that. So, but before we go any further, I'd like to answer, because since we're talking about this, because in the end result, obviously we're going to we have a point as fellow Catholics. We obviously assume that Catholicism is the only step towards any freedom in America, purely because without it there is no real freedom. So, but with that, we have the answer of, well, should the church have been political? And so this was my precursor. So I've been reading into the Catechism a lot these past few days, and I ran across Catechism 2246, and it says, "It is a part of the church's mission to pass moral judgments even in matters related to politics, whenever the fundamental rights of man or the salvation of souls requires it. The only means she may use are those which are in accord with the gospel and the welfare of all men, according to the diversity of the time and circumstances." So, alluding to basically the church has a right to speak up for the salvation of souls, since some of the issues that we were going to bring up definitely contradict God's natural law or just commandments. So that definitely is a problem for our souls, because you don't want to do that, because that's a one-way trip to hell or purgatory. But we don't want to go to either. Well, we don't go to one. If you get to purgatory, yay, but nah. So other than that, weakness are more starting. You have the roadmap from the. Do you have seen the roadmap from the file?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you know where we're the numbering and all.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. So we're gonna start out with because America obviously started out as 13 colonies back in the 17th century, and then the 18th century roughly. So we want to look at first the instances of the faiths, and so we got the Protestantism first starts in the colonies, and I say the colonies for reasons. Colonies started with the Pilgrims in 1620. That was the first instance when Protestantism came over from the Indian Ocean to come here. India? No, Atlantic. Sorry, Atlantic. Wrong ocean. And then the Puritans came. What?
That's just a crazy error to make.
At least I didn't say Pacific, but
Indian is worse, bro. Indian Ocean is worse. What would they be doing over there?
Yeah. So, but anyways, the Puritans came in 1629, but then we get to Catholics. So the Catholics, why are they here? Because we talk that by Protestants, they assume that America is a Protestant nation. So that means the Catholics must have just come in, right? When the pickings were good. Actually, we were here prior with the Spanish. The Spanish crown paid for Columbus. The only reason Columbus came here with the Santa Maria and the other two ships, which I completely am blanking on, but they showed up. Spain was a Catholic country, and then in 1565, the Spanish arrived here on St. Augustine, Florida, and built what's the chapel? Crap, this is in the Symbolon. They built a shrine for Our Lady of La Leche, which is Our Lady of the Milk. And so that is still in St. Augustine, Florida. And so obviously we've been around for much more than the Protestants. And even during the colonies, we showed up and settled in Maryland in 1634. And then we actually found Maryland as well. So, and then we were in Pennsylvania. That was a little more accepting to us because there was a lot of anti-Catholic bigotry going off because Catholics couldn't vote. And then we had, so that was obviously a bit of an issue. But, before the nation even started, the Revolutionary War started in 1776, which is almost more than 100 years before the country actually started. The Declaration of Independence, which was in 1776. there was one Catholic signer, Charles Carroll. He was a Catholic, so he was the only Catholic though. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
and it's also like Texas. Texas was a part of Mexico, and then it became its own country, and then it became a part of the United States, and it did then, and still now has primarily Spanish influence or Mexican influence,
mhm,
and so and of course with that comes Catholicism.
yeah,
So it's always been there, at least in that regard, and what I believe it's the third largest state in the union.
yeah. Well, it's what, Alaska, California, and then Texas, I would assume. But yeah. So,
Mm.
but the nation was started, we had the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. So it states Congress shall make no law respecting any establishment of religion or permitting the free exercise therefore, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So this is essentially the every religion is allowed, or at least our modern creation of it, which is that you can be any religion, even if it's non-Christian or no religion, which is pretty basic. Everyone knows. But I would argue, and this is probably where, Javi, you're gonna learn. I wouldn't say learn anything, but definitely this is an opinion that I have, is that the First Amendment was made precisely to appease Protestantism because they weren't as unified as, say, the Catholic Church. And so they didn't specify that it was
Mhm.
a Christian faith because Christian was very susceptible to definition. I don't know. I just be interested in what you would think about that. But
Yeah, I'm not too sure on that topic, but I do think we have to play devil's advocate that perhaps these people aren't necessarily arguing that the United States should be institutionally Protestant, as in um, it gets into like being a part of the government. I don't think that they were trying to argue is that the culture should be Protestant and that the majority of people should be Protestant. I don't think it's the First Amendment. Um, so I think that that's an important thing because I think we as Catholics would desire that the nation be primarily Catholic, and I think it's just you got to just determine which culture that comes with either one of those forms of Christianity is going to be the most fruitful for the nation.
mm, all right, yeah, okay. So, other than that, I just want to show briefly of what we're at, what type, like with Protestantism and us, what is our challenge right now. And so, coming from Pew Research, we have the religious groups right here. And so you can see that as Protestantism, it is, or for Christians, Catholics make up about, give or take, 20%, which is about a third of the graph here. And the Protestants or evangelicals take up another third, and then about, give or take, the main line is the other third of the Christians here. So Catholics are almost as equal to the main line and evangelical churches, at least in who is identifying as such. Now, of course, there is some problems, as we'll get in later. There's a lot of Catholics who identify as Catholic, and by that they mean they went to Catholic school. So that kind of fluctuates with some of the numbers. But yeah, but other than
Yeah, but
that,
of
so
course,
this is what we're
there's
fighting
also
against.
there's also nominal Protestants as well. I've met very
Yeah.
many of those. So, but I think statistically, that number that you see there is probably still pretty helpful to demonstrate
Mm-hmm.
what the composition is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It said it was conducted in 07, 14, and then between the 23rd and 24th. So it's a fairly somewhat recent Pew. So, but let's get into the meat then of it, since we've gone through our basic stuff. So transgenderism. We have transgenderism. So I'm going to show another Pew Research. Whoops, wrong format. There we are. So we have this. Oops, sorry, there we are. So we have this Pew Research graph. So this shows the percent of adults who are of a certain faith, whether or not a person is what gender they are by their birth. And so we have, you can see that Protestantism has, oops, sorry, wrong graph. You can see that there is some differencing in the Protestant graph where it's a 70% almost are basically saying it's determined by birth, but there is that little bit. But the evangelical is very heavily towards it's not, but you go down towards the main line and it's a little bit more 50-50. And the Catholics are also in a problem in trying to figure out what is what still as well, which is sad, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But this I spotted from recently from the, you can see the St. Lutherans down here. And so you can see that they're putting on a drag show, which obviously is not something they are attempting to be perverting what is in the natural law of man and woman. And then there's this logo from the Episcopal Church. And as you can tell, the Episcopals would all out on the, not only is it gay, but it's also trans. So yeah, but we go into Catholicism. Or actually, is there anything you want to say about Protestants in the realms of transgenderism before I move on into us?
Yeah, so I think what's really interesting is I was listening to a lecture by one of the professors that I'm editing videos for at my university. He is a graduate professor teaching a program in Masters of Divinity, specializes in preaching, and he was looking at statistics and came to this observation based on his experiences in between the statistics. He noted that it seems to be now within the church, that is Protestants, that you find instead of our theology influencing our politics is influencing our theology. And I find that to be a very striking claim, because I think that within Protestantism, because there's less institutional dogma, there's less dogma which must be upheld, as is the case within Catholicism. We have all of these things that you must believe and you cannot contradict, because you would be going against the truth of the gospel. You would be, and things that are tangential to the gospel. So basically, you cannot celebrate sin and the likes. And so when you don't have as many things that are institutionalized that you just can't go against, otherwise you would just be ruining the whole thing, which is the paradigm within Catholicism. Once you get away from that, the door sort of opens for you to be influenced by the culture. And so I think that over the past, since the 60s, especially, I think that you've seen the influence of modern culture and the sexual revelation, the sexual revolution, and all those things, and all the movements which came up from that. You find it in very profoundly. You see these institutions moving towards accepting homosexuality, and then accepting transgenderism, and then for many of them accepting things like masturbation and pornography and the like, moving towards all of these things. And it becomes to the point that it's institutionalized, that you see these institutions promoting these things, accepting them, and even celebrating them. And I think that it's interesting because then you see evangelicalism, it's sort of like reactionary to that. They're leaving those churches, they are leaving those mainline churches, and then forming their own things, in which they are adhering more traditional doctrines, but in doing so, they're sort of estranging themselves. and breaking themselves apart. Whereas in Catholicism and in mainline denominations, you see them not just promoting themselves, uh, but rather, well, so it's not that they aren't just promoting themselves. The thing is just that you have these massive institutions widely. You have a foundation upon which you're building on. Whereas in evangelicalism, while they may have decent doctrine, what they're doing is they're breaking down a lot of that institution and trying to rebuild it from scratch. And rebuilding an entire institution from scratch, particularly a religious one, that takes hundreds of years. And that's if it's all united. The problem is that within evangelicalism, it isn't united. You have all these individual churches that are vying for themselves, whereas within the main lines and within Catholicism, you have all the churches are united with one another, and it is an institution which is able to grow together. Whereas in evangelicalism, you don't see that, and so that's sort of the downside. Is that they're not so much into the transgender stuff, but they're losing their power to have influence. Whereas the main lines have just fallen in completely into the issue of transgenderism, and it's really unfortunate. But I just don't foresee those institutions being able to recover from these things, because you find that liberalism is within the very highest ranks of it. It does not seem to be something which is going to be allowed to disappear.
Mhm. Yeah. I can concede that. Yeah, I say it especially. Like because even within our own faith, there are those who are trying to change it, but that is where the doctrine that we have, which is typically just found in this, um, is there. Because just getting into kind of our side then and how we comparing to the Protestants, because we have a certain duty to uphold the natural law. We understand that there is the binary that you are either male or female because you were made as such. Um, in the Catechism, there's actually in 2331. Let's see, 31, way over here. Oh well, in the gospel or in Genesis, not the gospel, God created man in His own image, male and female. He created them. And so he requires he created us all in the way that he is intended, um, precisely as who is male and who is female. We are supposed to accept that, and that comes also from the Catechism on 2333, where we are guided to accept what our sexuality is rather than create our own. Um,
Yeah, and it's interesting
which
because this idea of being able to change your sexuality is an accretion, to say the least. It's a very novel idea, which even I'm 21 years old, and my lifetime, I can tell you that for the majority of my life, for as short as it is, that was not an acceptable thing. It's not something which you would go into, like, for instance, when I was in elementary school, they told me that there's two genders, you know,
Mhm.
and so it's really a cultural thing, and um, it would be a whole topic in of itself to argue about the fruits and the losses of transgenderism. But I think many of the people who are leaning towards this conservative religious, that transgenderism is not a good thing. It's something which has caused people to mutilate their children, to mutilate themselves, and then to later regret it. And it's one of those things where rather than treating the dysphoria, because that's what it is, it's gender dysphoria, they are giving into the dysphoria. Now imagine if you have body dysphoria, where you don't like the way your body is, you think that you're fat, and so you fast yourself until you become anorexic. That is unhealthy, and for the mind and for the body. And likewise, I would say the same for transgenderism. And so it's a big issue issue. But the thing is, while it has become institutionalized within mainline Protestantism, it can never become institutionalized in Catholicism, even if you may have a lot of individual Catholics who are saying that
Mhm.
they promote this stuff. As much as they may try, they're never going to get the institution to accept that. And
Mhm.
ultimately, it is not the the general populace which has the power. It's going to be the institution. It's going to be the hierarchy. No matter how many individuals want transgenderism to go away and to not be, if the institutions and the people who teach and who are the pastors within it are are still accepting it, it's never going to go away. And that'll never be the case in Catholicism because the institution just cannot accept what happened.
Mhm.
And so, in that regard,
Mhm.
we are able to have a greater persistence in our beliefs. And so you'll find that most probably don't accept that stuff. Now I know you're showing statistics there, and unfortunately there may be many who claim to be Catholic who accept that. However, I think that you would never find a really faithful Catholic that would accept that. You may be able to say the same thing about mainline Protestants, but once again, the fundamental difference is whether it is institutionalized or just a problem within the general body. In
Mhm.
mainline Protestantism, it's institutionalized, and Catholicism will never be institutionalized. And ultimately, it's institutions that have powers. Institutions are persistent and change.
Mhm.
You can it's hard to change the mind of an institution.
Mhm.
Take the United States for instance. Our
Mhm.
Bill of Rights and the fundamental principles laid out in there will never go away, as much as they may be pushed around and people try to change them or try to take away from things. It would always bound. It would always come to find that balance in the middle where it belongs. And the Catholic Church even is much more rigid in that because we don't move around on these issues. Rather, we
Mhm.
just stay the same in the opinions. That is, the opinions of the hierarchy, which is the head of.
Mhm. Yeah. Um. Crap. What was that thought? Oh well. Um. Gosh, I don't remember. I remember a question I was going to ask you, but I thought. Oh yeah. Yeah. You talk about changing the amendments that we have. Well, there's one particular amendment that I'd like to strike off, but then we'll get to it later in the feminism zone. But can I because you're talking though about institutionalized. What
Mhm.
exactly because to Protestants, they like I think the Southern Baptists, they have like their annual like meeting or something to agree to strike this, add this, do this or that. To
Mhm.
Catholics, how would we be differ? Like,
You
would that be
can't do
another
that.
council?
There is no meetings.
Okay.
There is no meetings to decide what what moral positions to change. You cannot change moral positions. You can reaffirm what it has always been. You could come to understand it in perhaps new light, but it's never fundamental. You find in this is that like, for instance, the Catholic Church is the only one that still keeps stance on contraception. Even arguably, many Orthodox have fallen away from this. The Catholic Church
Mm,
is the only one that remains in these positions, is because when something is a matter of faith and morals, you cannot vote on whether that stays or goes away. You know, that's just not how it works.
mhm,
Now, we do, to be fair, we do have our councils where the clergy come together and they come to decide things, but ultimately they're going to be deciding it in light of what is found in the gospel to remain, much as you would find in perhaps to an even greater extent. But this is a slightly usable metaphor. The Congress, or you go into a court, they're not deciding, oh, should we do this or should we not do that? It's okay. What is going to be best in line with our founding principles? And so because of that, we are more resistant to that change. In fact, I'd say we're invulnerable to that change in these regards, because once something is declared this straight up is intrinsically immoral, we cannot change that position. There is no going back. There is no revising that. And that's the thing about the Catholic Church is you just can't, like, once something like that comes up, you just can't revise that position. You may have rogue agents trying to change it or trying to advocate for different opinions, but ultimately institution is never going to dogmatize things that we would say are intrinsically wrong.
Good. That's a good thing, though, because if nothing, because the truth stays the truth, which is precisely what the church is standing for, right? Because as the bride
Any
of
church is
Christ,
supposed to stand for.
mm-hmm, true. So yeah, but I don't really have anything else on the transgenderism. So I'm gonna give like 10 seconds for the chat if there's anything there. I think there was from Eric. But I think that's a comment, not a question per se. So, if the wording was poor, that could be revised. The idea is okay. So I think we'll move down then. So, like I told Javi during we had a call to kind of discuss this real brief. Because I always say that transgenderism is a fruit, is the leaf of the branch of the acceptance of homosexuality. And then we got the trunk, which is feminism, and then we got the root, which is Protestantism. So that's why we're going down this route. So now we're going to talk about homosexuality, but that's going to include far more.
Why would you say that Protestantism is the root of that of feminism?
We broke away. Protestantism broke us away from the somewhat the truth, in that we could all make our own law, like break of not natural law, that's later, but in a way of that we are allowed to make the world, the rules of the world are up to us, not what has been laid. And so then we get into feminism, which
I
is
think
a
that
destruction.
I think I would say it's not so much because they would still try to say that it's the rules of the world are up to what has been. The problem is that whenever you can reinterpret and reassess what has been laid out, in spite of there already being rulings on things like homosexuality for thousands of years, the problem is that once you can start reinterpreting things and changing your mind on essential things, as happened with particularly with ecclesiology and understanding of the church as well as the canon, things that you would think would be endearing, once you can reinterpret those things, of you being able to adapt these things and then slowly over time make greater revisions that ultimately move you away from what was originally there. And so I think in that sense you could say it was the root of it, that openness to that change. Although I would say that there are many, I think that whole revolution was atheistic in nature, and Protestantism was just more vulnerable, more susceptible into some of the things that came from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see what you're saying. Yeah, like before you started, I thought of later, and it's like we first broke away from the church, and then feminism was a break of the domestic church, and so that separates. So now you're separated from God's family, and then you're separated from your real family, and then we get into you're separated from the natural law, and then transgenderism is just kind of it's the symptom of this all. But
yes, it seems to be a compounding thing And I think ultimately the origin of all of these compounding problems would be the devil, that which is evil.
Obviously, yeah.
But if you know, if you keep your door unlocked, it allow that leaves the possibility of somebody coming into your house and snatching things away. And so I think that that's just a fundamental vulnerability that came with just the paradigm of Protestantism.
Yeah. That's right, people. Lock your doors. I'm looking at you and my former roommates. Anyways, so we're going to no, I showed that. We're on a different thing. So we're gonna get into then the homosexuality then. So we're gonna start with the main hitter, the fruit, not the fruit, the main course of the homosexuality, and that would be gay marriage. And I understand it's gay marriage, but we're just gonna say gay marriage so we don't have to keep doing this for 5 sentences. So in Protestantism, so I have this graph again from the Pew, which I think some people didn't like the Pew, but it was a readily available graph. So we can see from this. So I don't know how you could tell, but the Catholics are right here, so we are prohibiting it. Now we get into allowing it. So what would be because we showed the evangelical Lutheran and the Episcopal, would those be considered mainline or would those be considered evangelical?
So obviously the conservative Jewish movement isn't. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah,
What is
this
that?
is
Is that
this is a
Judaism,
whole
or are
religion.
they like Christians that want to be Jews?
I think this is a total graph. I don't think this is a
Okay.
just Christian one.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
pretty sure I saw one other time though.
Okay, I see. That's Judaism. Okay, so the Episcopal Church, the evangelical. No, I think that's going to be a breakaway, and for reasons I can get into if you want me to, I would consider the breakaway churches. Um, they're kind of in the middle of the road between evangelicals and Protestants, but I think their mindset is fundamentally it, it 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 tends a little bit more evangelical. I'm more inclined to put them in that crowd, just because of the nature of their hierarchy and the way it's able to break apart, which something I think you find in mainline Protestantism, but I do think there's enough difference to regard them differently. But of these, forgive me if I'm wrong, but the Episcopal Church should be the Episcopal Church, the Presbyterian Church, and oh my goodness, what is the Society of Friends? And the
Quakers.
yeah, those two would be mainline. The others seem to be just other things.
Okay. So we have a combined sanctifying same-sex marriage in both mainline and evangelical. So this is just still Protestant, broadly Protestant. It's not just one branch, but both branches are suffering, is what you're then saying.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we have to get into the problem with this. And when we talk about saving America, I think that the thing is from the liberalism and the cultural change which have broken apart the institutional and moral, I guess, the institutions within the United States, particularly sorry, I don't know if you heard that, particularly the nuclear family. I think fundamentally the nuclear family would be at the center of it. In order to save America, we would want to maintain the nuclear family, and I think that a nuclear family being a part of that vision of Christ. When you look at nuclear family, you see you have the father, the mother, and their children. fundamentally it's triune, it's a communion of persons. They all are one flesh and one sense of the other. And so fundamentally for most people in their lives, the nuclear family is going to be the image of God in their family and their lives. That is what they're going to be. That is their mini church. Even the Bible uses that terminology.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
to break that apart fundamentally is to take away the morality and the structure and all things which allows prosperity within a family. And what things like homosexuality does is it takes away one of the fundamental aspects of that, because sexuality from God's point of view is meant to be unitive and procreative. It begets children and it unifies. Either one of those away, you get problems that ultimately cascade into dissolving the entire structure. And so if you have those things, and I say this not out of hatred, I do, even if it may not seem like it at times, if you don't have all of those things, if you're breaking apart the nuclear family, if you're breaking apart the domestic church, fundamentally you will not have an America which is as we want it to
Mm-hmm.
be, because the domestic church is going to be the most fundamental unit of society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's 6 out of 7 days you're going to be there. So, yeah. And that is why there is a section for the nuclear family. And so, and you brought up the definition of marriage before in my notes. I'm just joking with you, but yeah, I
They
do
all go
agree with that.
together.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do agree with what you're saying because yeah, without the nuclear family, a lot of this happens. And that's why I definitely like to get a little ahead of myself too. It's like this is why I don't like daycare, because it's like you have the responsibility for your children to educate them in the faith and everywhere else. And so, you know, gotta focus
Yes, I
on that.
grew up going to daycare, and I don't think it was fruitful for me. Unfortunately, that was sort of out of
Mm-hmm.
necessity because I had a family wasn't there,
Mm,
and so it was substituted by society raising me up, in a sense. Um,
mm-hmm.
and that is just it's not good. It's what breaks apart
Mm-hmm.
families. Is what causes delinquency. You'll find that fatherless children are the ones that are in the biggest trouble. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's like 90.
and things of that nature. And so we want to get away from that. And unfortunately, within Protestantism, just because of that lack of institutional strength and being able to maintain their morals in the face of great cultural change and great cultural pushback, it's allowed it to fall into these things. And
Mm,
so fundamentally, I don't see, even if we could return to a pious Protestant America, I don't see what would keep it from ever evolving back into what it is now.
mm, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's even like Judges. Judges is an entire chapter or an entire book of Israel being going back to the golden calf essentially, and then rejecting it, only to then rebuild it again. So, um, but yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah, we have lived though over a decade now with Oberfell. Fortunately, we have states now that are trying to overturn it in America. They've sent in the what are they called? Resolutions. So I believe it's heck, balls. Idaho, I think, is one, and someone else. I've done 2 videos on this. I should know it. I don't remember. But Oklahoma, Dusty Devers, who I'll mention again because he'll be in here somewhat a few times. He was a pastor, and I would assume of an evangelical sort, and he's passed one in Oklahoma, or he introduced it, I should say. But whether or not he passes it will be another. But yeah, we don't need this. I didn't record that. And we don't need to talk about James Martin. Yeah, he wanted us to do, what was it? Pride Month. There was a video that he was doing that, but again, it's just Father James Martin, and that's all that's there.
Yeah.
We're back into the same topic of what you were saying earlier with the institution. It's like just because he tries doesn't mean he'll work. But if we want to talk though about Catholicism, there's we actually outlaw the gay marriage in the Catechism of 2357. So let me run to it real quick. Oh, there's homo. So I say 2357. Oops, other side. So homosexuality refers to relations between men or between women who experience an exclusive or predominant sexual attraction toward persons of the same sex. So they are contrary to the natural law that this also says. They close the sexual act to the gift of life, which is a problem of how sex is dictated. But yeah, but the last line it says is under no circumstances can they be approved. Now, so that obviously says that homosexuality is wrong. Now, I want to make this point clear because in Protestantism, they tend to group same-sex attraction and equate it equal to homosexuality. But the church actually indicates that same-sex attraction is, while not something you shouldn't act on, because having the attraction is one thing, but enacting on it is another. The inclination is fine as long as you remain chaste. And you're striving for the perfection. So that is to unite your suffering towards Christ with the fact that you do not enact on those feelings. Because again, all Catholics must adhere to the natural law. And so that natural law is man is with woman is with man. They get married, have kids, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah. Is there anything you want to add more to this or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I thought I saw something else here. I know I stated some more of the catechism with it. Oh, yeah. You go further into the catechism, you'll get to the inclinations. I didn't write down the numbers, but it's right after the 2357. In the catechism, the church specifically states that just because you are attracted and all that jazz. So now we're getting into something a little less, that it's a bit more frequent. So are you familiar with Dave Rubin?
No.
Okay. So Dave Rubin is a political commentator. He used to be working for The Blaze. I don't know what he's doing now, but he's gay. But he also rented wombs out. So he has 2 boys with him. So he used surrogacy. So he's got 2 kids coming out. I think they might be his. I'm not so familiar on what the biological needs of the kid are. But as you were stating earlier, with why as surrogacy, right? Because this is a poison of the or fruit of the poisonous tree. There we are. I don't know why it took me forever to finally get the right terminology around. But because the homosexuality is wrong, anything coming from that is obviously going to be perverted. Would you not agree with that sentence?
I think it depends. There are probably like homosexual groups have done fruitful things, but like in terms of any derivative sexuality from something that is wrong sexually, yeah. Any derivative sexual act from something that is in itself intrinsically wrong is going to be wrong. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So because as you had stated earlier, marriage, it's two purposes, and usually how I say is 70% of it, or not 70, yeah, 70% is devoted towards getting each other to heaven, because that is marriage's primary goal. Then there is the 30%, which is devoted towards the procreation of children. And I will say plus or minus 10 on those numbers of the value of each. But um, obviously, getting each other to heaven probably would take a higher precedence. And then the family life is the whole point of marriage, is to build the domestic church. I literally went to a wedding a few weeks ago, and the father of the bride said domestic church. And so I started smiling because of that. Because if you very say that, um, yeah, um, but we also have. I didn't realize that even the Catechism in 2376, it actually throws in that getting a person to use their uterus is actually gravely immoral, as it says. So it writes
Yeah, it's not
basically.
unitive.
Yeah, well, it's like
You
you
know,
can't.
like it's because if you're doing that, you're binding yourself to that person. You are becoming one flesh with them.
Mm.
So like,
Even though you're not
because if
having
you
sex,
think
it's
about it, you
still.
think about it like with like the Jews, for instance. You go back to them, the Israelites. The fundamental thing in marriage was the unity that occurs when they consummate the marriage. That is the important thing. And so if you're the sexual in doing sexual act, you are binding, and that's not to say that if you have premarital sex and then you confess and and you move on with your life and then you have a valid marriage with someone else later, that can't be forgiven. But
Mm.
that fundamentally, that procreative act, that sexual act, is unitive. And so to do it in a way where you're just utilizing somebody else in order to generate life is fundamentally disordered. That cannot
Mm.
be, that cannot be something that is the way that things were intended. It just doesn't fit into that paradigm.
Mm. Yeah. Well, and it's like you were talking about um, sex and having multiple partners in premarital sex. There is a graph, which I don't have, but if you follow Tim Gordon, who does some of this, there's a graph. He showed a graph one time of that the more sexual partners that a woman has, the more likely she is for a divorce. And I think like I want to say it's like after 3, it goes to like 8 or something. So it was a insanely
Yeah.
high number because that's just how unifying the sex is. And then of course we have to talk about how divorce is so easy to get, which we'll actually get into um, eventually. So, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's
other
really
than the
crazy because the more you have sex with different people, the less unifying sex is because
mm,
obviously, because it's like if you're having sex with somebody but yet you don't retain that unity that comes, then it's like it's just degrading it, and you just keep doing that over and
mhm,
over and over again. There's no more unity in sex. And so how could you say then that you could even possibly have a sexual partner with whom you have children and still have that unity, because fundamentally that act and the fruit of it, which is childbirth, is not going to be unitive for you anymore, which is why we wait until marriage to do that. I guess it's want to do that.
mhm, yeah. So yeah, and then just finishing off the surrogacy, obviously with children being within homosexual marriages, they are deprived of one of the two parents. So either they're getting two dads or two moms. Um, Unlike one of the shirts I used to have, which is that because me and Javi have two moms, but we also have a dad. Um, making a Mary joke there. But it deprives the children of one or the other, because I can tell even from my own childhood, it's like having my mom and then having my dad was very when I needed my dad came in later, and that turned me into more of this than um, my mother probably would have. And again, as I kind of stated earlier, none of this would happen. Like, we wouldn't have to worry about surrogacy if we didn't have a problem with, or at least her, surrogacy for homosexuals. We wouldn't have to worry about that if, again, they did not address their same-sex attraction, but they treated the same-sex attraction with the right chastity that would be required. So, but yeah, I'm gonna move down into the topic of the purpose of sex. Is there anything else you want to say about homosexual or gay marriage or yeah, surrogacy? Sorry, wrong one. You have 1 sec. Hello? Did you say something? Yeah, I'm not hearing you if you're saying anything, by the way. Oh, okay. Well, I guess while I'll wait for Javi to come back, thank you all for tuning in. We are still going to be on. I'm not closing it. But how's everyone today working? I guess since it's just me and an empty chair. Hold on, there's a lot of chat. Good grief. Let's see. So, let's see. Batman Inc. Ah, yeah. It has been helpful. Okay, interesting. Yep. Well, I would agree with what you were saying with disagreeing with that. Obviously, I hold that opinion as a Catholic. No salvation outside the church. Um, that's true for everything, and that's kind of the question that we're asking. We're asking the question, but not necessarily answering it. As a Protestant. Oh no, that wasn't it. Thought he was in Columbus. Thought he was in India. Was he in India? Yeah, because he thought he didn't know there was anything there. Yeah. That's right. Nintum Pinta. Yeah, totally. Yeah. It had to be Spanish in that way. Pretty sure he did. Oh, he's answering that. Pew's whack. When I was about 20, transgender. Yeah. Yeah, I remember I was working for the Math Learning Success Center. There was a guy who was a dude. He turned into a they, and I found that out via the group chat that we all had for workers, and then he became a them. Or no, he was a he, turned to a they, and then he turned to a she. I came out of the bathroom one time and I saw him come out in a dress, and I thought I timed warp or went to a different world. I don't know if he's hearing me on that. He can, but I can't hear him. He's calling me a gringo or something. Let's see. Chart was from Pew. As a non-Christian, I think Catholicism is better than Protestantism. Well, thank you, Akron. I'm sorry, I'm butchering that. Are you nodding because of me or because of software? I was just expecting a word. I was not expecting the full finger. I think Unity Cam. You were watching Miss Doubtfire in real life. Ooh,
Hello.
I heard that. Yeah, you're back.
Okay, cool.
Hold on. I raised you a bit just because you were soft. Okay. So back up and running.
Just everything fell apart.
I hate when that happens. That's happened to me on stream too. My shocks have died on me, and I've had videos, and I've just had to be like, well, captions it is. But yeah. So you good to continue then?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna talk about sex again then. So the church believes that sex is only between a man and his wife, so they have to be married. And the reason for that is again a so I would say I think again it was like the 60-40 plus or minus 10 where the unity between wife or man and wife and procreation of children. So very heavily children are the center of sex because that is the whole point of why you are where you are. And by that, I mean dudes where we are. And so, but we have this use of sex, but we've perverted sex with different um not issues, but instruments to where we can get all of the fun, but none of the I wouldn't say responsibility, but responsibility. We're running from the responsibility of raising the family that we are supposed to be um, having via the domestic church. And so to start us off, we're going to talk about the pill bit and condoms. So I think I complete or no. So in the beginning in 1930, all Christians did outlaw contraception. So back in the as you had previously alluded to, Javi, is that all of them outlawed it. So no Catholic, no Protestant was going to allow either the birth control pill or um, condoms. Now, taking from Catholic Answers, the article of Protestants Against Contraception, today, no Protestant church, quote, today, no Protestant church maintains the historical Christian faith on this issue. Only the Catholic Church has stood firm and resisted the onslaught of secularism in sexual ethics. And that is a straight quote again from the Protestants Against Contraceptions from Catholic Answers. Now, what is interesting is in the same article, it writes, quote, reconsidering the issue of contraception and are rejecting the contraception mindset. In doing so, they are returning to the historical position of Christianity. So, and you kind of alluded to that, though, earlier with how the mainline or the, I'll just let you take it over, but you were talking about how the movements were trying to come back to traditional minds, right?
Yeah, they're trying, but like, especially when you get down to things, the problem is that whenever you have this mindset which is more susceptible to change and to variation, things that are a little bit further down the stream, like contraception, so easily. Which is why nobody except the Catholic Church has maintained this position. And it's a problem because with contraception, when you add contraception to the mix, life becomes fundamentally opposed to, sexuality becomes fundamentally opposed to procreation. what it does is it opens the door to a kind of sexuality which is devoid of the openness to life. And so when you do that, it just leads to all of these problems, and there's the possibility of sex just merely rather than unitive and procreative. It can just be pure recreation because the contraception allows you to do that. And so that's the problem with it, is that if you have contraception, then what it's going to lead to is all these greater problems downstream. And it's not just that that's the problem. It's it fundamentally, because it is fundamentally against life. It is unnatural in that way. And because of that, it's unacceptable. And that's what all Christians used to believe. And now we are the only ones who remain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, there's obviously been some pushback where many Protestants are trying to get off the pill now. Even in Catholic circles, there are a few women who have gone on to it because of what the doctors supposedly have said. Because I think for some reason it helps with acne, or obviously I'm a dude, so I don't know exactly what biologically does, but it does, I thought, screw up with um, your well, it can mess with your fertility, but the your period, it messes with the time frame, because it just, if it does it for that long, it just um, messes with your biological ongoings. Um, but like, especially, but if we wanted to talk about men with the use of a condom,
Well, and
that
but
is
although I will say, there is like very special case scenarios for contraception that are acceptable within the Catholic Church, like for medical purposes. But if that ends up just falling down to you that you don't want to have children, that's not going to be acceptable, because that's just fundamentally wrong. You cannot you cannot be Catholic and get married and be having sex and just never intend to have children. That's not how that works. If you're Catholic and you get married and you're going to be having sex, and I say it that way because I think that, if I'm correct, there are exceptions for people that married but yet are celibate, which is something we actually see in the Bible. I think it's interesting. It was like, I think the Corinthians that were asking Paul about this, like, we're married, and like some of them were trying to just be celibate, and he's like, don't use the marital act. Not to say that you shouldn't have celibate marriage. That would be what Mary had, which is something that is a traditional, not only a Catholic belief, but many Protestants have held that as well.
well, it's called a Josephite marriage.
A Josephite marriage, yeah. But it's like, if you're going to be having sex, sex cannot, once again, it cannot be separated from that procreative aspect. It needs to, you have to be open to life. And so when you're just using contraception in order to avoid that, it's fundamentally wrong.
Well, the Catechism in 2370, it calls it intrinsically evil. Mainly because you're not giving yourself totally to your partner, because you're not giving your special ingredient, quote, quote, over to your spouse. So, but yeah, I agree with what you're saying, though. But there is methods, right? This, like, just because like there's contraception, and so then we got the problem of, well, what am I going to do now if, let's say, we have 7 kids and we don't want the 8th? The church does have natural family planning, so that's obviously charting basically the cycles, I'm pretty sure. And just, there's that zone where you just don't do it, and then there's the rest of the time, because there's this weird belief, I don't know why, but I kind of see it on Twitter. I kind of feel like many Protestants, they have the chastity when they're single, but when they get married, that's when, for some reason, it kind of like unlocks just like you can be a perv. Not to be just getting straight to the point. I know the next section we're gonna go somewhat more into something like that, but um, I just don't know what you would think about that because I see that where, especially when they talk about Mary, not sleeping with Joseph because for some reasons, even though they throw Corinthians at her, which is funny because Corinthians was after Jesus, so that was way after she. I'm pretty sure Joseph is gone at that point, so she's getting charged with a crime that she can't. It's kind of like reparations at that point. Um, so
Yeah,
I'm
no,
curious on what your
the fundamental difference with natural family planning is that you are coinciding with the natural like human cycle for like
Mhm.
procreation. And somebody might like object to that by saying, "Oh, well, wouldn't it be the same if we just use contraception in the time that we're not in the times that we are have children but have children?" The problem with that is the thing that's good about natural family planning is that in those periods where the pregnancy where pregnancy would occur, you're literally just abstaining from sex, and so it gets into that kind of like that Josephite type thing where it's
Mhm.
you're just abstaining,
Mm.
and that's something which is reverenced in the Bible is those periods of not having sex so as to praise the Lord, um, and the focus on prayer. So it's just fundamentally different. It's a matter of abstaining versus still having sex and just straight up block like unnaturally blocking that procreative possibility.
Mm.
But there are just reasons why you would do natural family planning, as in like um, aligning your sexual activity to what to so that there's like less chance of a pregnancy at any given moment, um, because that openness to life, like if you have a couple children and you're going to still have that unitive aspect of the sexuality, like for instance, once people are old and they can't have children anymore but they're married, that doesn't mean that can't still they can't still go acts with each other. You know, it still has that unity there, and just that natural aspect of the procreative nature has naturally concluded. And they've already fulfilled it, and
Mm.
having their children and caring for them.
Mhm.
Um, but once again, difference between the unnatural indulgence versus the natural abstinence.
Mhm. Yeah. And then even though you look, because if we're going to talk about Protestantism and Catholicism, many more, you would say, out of both, if I was to say, let's say we had two families, one Catholic and one Protestant, and I told you which one had more kids, which one would you bet money on?
Oh, the Catholic one.
Yeah. Because we be fruitful and multiply. I like though. I heard this one thing. It kind of was from a Protestant though, I think, but it was be fruitful and multiply. But some people they only have like two children, so that doesn't multiply. You just make um equal or you're net neutral, and so that's why you have to have more because then you actually multiplied. Um, I thought that was funny, but I think that's an intriguing thought.
Yeah, that's not the Catholic family that only ever has two children. That, but just in
Mhm.
Catholicism, there's a more openness to
Mhm.
life.
Yeah, and obviously there are issues about conceptions because I know infertility is a um, trial for some couples, and but I forgot what's the art, because they bring that, usually some people will bring that up. I forgot what for. But they'll talk about how, I think it's like marriage. Like, can you have a marriage without having sex and thus children? And of course it's like, yes, because the marriage it's not just about procreation. As I had said earlier with the differences, it's like it's 70% of a marriage is devoted to getting each other to heaven, and then there's that 30%. So that 30 is to ensure that you do the procreative act, but it's not a necessity in a marriage, because even older people can get married. Like when I was going through RCA, there was a guy who was like 80 or so, and he got married to another woman. So it's like, I sincerely doubt they're doing anything. But yeah. But yeah, I think we'll move on to the next section, unless you have anything else about contraceptions.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a complicated issue, but fundamentally, the paradigm is going to naturally flow once again from that idea of marriage and particularly sanction. So it's just it's a complicated thing, but once again, we have to remember that this used to be all of Christians that agreed on this,
Mhm. Yeah.
and now it's no one but the Catholics.
Yeah. And it's like, we have the problems that we have nowadays with premarital sex, and some of that could be spawned because of the allowance of the contraceptive
Most of it
method.
is, I would say.
Yeah.
Most of it is
Because
spawned
like,
from that.
yeah. Because like, as a Catholic, obviously you can confess that you've done it, and then you're not supposed to do it again. That's at least the ideal. And Protestantism, they could do that as well, but the thing that you would have to ask is, are they going to change in that way? But that's in more sacramental stuff. Excuse me, than I think we were planning on tonight. So, crap, I thought there was something else. Nope, that's it. Okay. So moving on to what we have to title differently, because YouTube can't let us say this word. But we're going to talk briefly about, because if we're going to talk about all of this, and we're still in homosexuality, mind you, because having doing the business with a rubber is kind of weird. But doing the rubber yourself, or not doing the rubber yourself, but the act of gooning, and for those that don't know what it means, hold on, briefly, okay, Urban Dictionary, I think, has a definition for it, but gooning is as some of the Protestants were saying, self-service, because I was watching, because I told you about the Ruslan incident where Christian Wagner was talking about him, and I went back to that video to find the clips, and he member locked it. So darn, but the Council of Trent, he was talking about this. So in the video, how Dennis Prager, Jordan Peterson, and some Protestants get corn wrong, and of course the corn being the other the p word of it. So starting at the 26 minute mark, he basically has all these Protestants, and what they try to do, though, is say that, well, since gooning's not in the Bible, we don't have a clear answer on whether or not it's right or wrong. And then they try to separate the lust from the act. So, and of course, highly unlikely that you can do the later, because you need something to stimulate yourself in order to, what's the term, reach. But again, this is like, again, we're going in the same method of that the sex act is devoted away from the marital act. And
Yeah,
so,
and it's like that still is a sexual act. There's no unity and there's no procreation in it, so it's like doubly shitty because you just lost both of those things.
Mhm. Yeah. But it's weird. It's funny though because they talk about
Just don't do
like
that.
men.
Your testosterone will be better. You're not you
Yeah.
won't be
Mhm.
as effeminate.
Yeah. Well, and it's even like the neurons. Like, okay, you do it because you're married, but your brain is still working towards consuming that type of content still, um, because that's just how the stuff is made. Um, it is you are supposed to be a returning customer, um, especially for men who are more, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Psychful creatures, I guess. But yeah, but I bring in the catechism again on this as well. And let me find it real brief. Nope. We're close. There we are. So we got gooning, we got 2352. So by gooning is to be understood the deliberate stimulation of down under in order to deprive sexual pleasure, which is the whole purpose of the act, is just to so-called relieve yourself. But for the Protestants who want to throw that that lust is somehow different, the one before it, 2351, lust is a disordered desire for or innate enjoyment of sexual pleasure. Sexual pleasure is morally disordered when sought for itself, isolated from the marital act. So that should stop it there. So that hence why Catholics stand in against this. Because the one thing I thought was interesting is because they talk about that it's just a simple biological release, right? But then you're demeaning humanity to be nothing more than an animal, to be all like, well, I need to, do, and so then it's just I have to do. But it's like we are of
It's like
higher
my dog.
intelligence.
I have a dog.
Mhm.
He's like almost 2 years old, and he just like you know biological necessity, I guess. I don't know. He likes to hump the blanket, but it's like, do you think are you a dog? Are you gonna act like that? I would hope not.
Yeah. Well, it's like we obviously have our animalic like nature in the way, like let's say with in the terms of like urination. Like if I need to go to pee right now, I'm not going up here. I'm going to the bathroom because I'm a thinking individual. I'm not an animal that has to just think and then do. I have something more than just my instincts. I have an intellect. So
Yes, yes.
and
Yeah.
that's something that they're trying to just completely avoid with this topic. And this topic is very
Yeah, it also isn't a biological necessity. You can never do that and just you'd be absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah. And this issue is, this issue obviously has great problems in our today's world because we got the orange and black side, we got the OF, and then we just have other stuff that's just out there. So, but you know, there are ways to escape this, and the church obviously has its methods. Definitely the sacrament of reconciliation. There's the brotherhood that is just built into the church. Like hell tonight is brotherhood somewhat. But yeah, I think that's it. I don't know how long I want to spend on the next subject, but unless you have anything else really to say, I know this issue is kind of a
No.
small dip in the pool. Okay. Um, so yeah, I don't really want to spend too much on the spousal debt. So it's like in my notes I say spousal debt in quotes because I don't like saying debt. I like saying duty because spousal debt kind of has, I wouldn't say debt has a negative connotation, but spousal debt kind of has this like I'm owed, and I think it is true that you are owed, but it's should be received as well, because both members have a duty to, as a married couple, you both have a duty to satisfy each other in that realm of the marital act. So, but there's obviously times that, like, if your wife says she has a headache, then it's fine. But if she is giving a year or so for reasons of one ilk or another that are not acceptable, then obviously there's a discussion that needs to be played on.
Justified.
Yeah.
I think is the better word.
Yeah, a justified reason to not. So like something like that could probably be like a cancer diagnosis or something of that ilk. A pregnancy, I think, would be another. I think there's at some point in pregnancy that you're not supposed to. Or if like preeclampsia maybe or something like that ilk.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm asking a I'm asking a younger Gen Z guy than me.
Yeah, I don't know why you're asking me.
But
I'm just turning
that's
priesthood.
true. That's true. Yeah, I'm at yeah, I had a guy, he was in the college and he was a ladies' man, and I'm like, wow, he's gonna get all the ladies. Turned to be a priest, and so it's like, oh, so he's getting none of the ladies.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so other than that, I think we're closing out homosexuality to move on to feminism, unless there's any final thoughts you had about the homosexuality that we've missed. Rightful. Okay. Neato. So we're going to talk about feminism. So feminism encompasses at least three things. We got abortion, IVF, and then the nuclear family, which we'll discuss. So with abortion, though, there is here we are. We have another Pew, just quick look at. So we can see who opposes, and we can see the Catholics are right there. Right here is where the Catholics are. But yeah, that's what I should do. So the Catholics are over here, and we got a few more who have joined in our opposition. Excuse me. But we also still we're seeing a recurring theme of the evangelical Lutherans show up. The Episcopal Church is showing up again on this other side, and then we got some others like the Presbyterian Church and the United Church of Christ. So, so we have that.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah. So, but the evangelicals, do I have that? Yes, I do. I have another graph. Why did I shift? So we have another graph. We can see here that the evangelicals are very much more on the against, while the main line is a little more for the abortion. And then Catholics were at a 60-40, 60 again, for and 40 illegal. Wait, what? Good grief. So we obviously have some issues with some Catholics who are reporting intriguingly.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just nominal Catholicism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, and then, what was it? Oh, yeah, just this. So this just kind of, I think this was from a different article, but it reinforced what the Pew had been writing. So, yeah, mainline is more acceptance to the abortion, while the evangelicals are trying to take it out more. So,
and once again, it's systemic because it gets in their highest ranks. It's literally something that they're prohibiting in their like confessions, whereas that's something that we fundamentally never could, as much as we may have an estranged group of lay people that are doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's like I don't know how. So there's I mentioned Senator Dusty Devers from Oklahoma. So he made a bill that would outlaw it. And so here's another bill, I would assume like it, that's in Ohio. So I don't know how familiar you are with the abolitionists, but as you can tell from this title, they're going to be charging the mothers with homicide because, as the church also agrees in 2270, we believe that life begins at conception. And I'll just read it so it's very clear today. 2270. Where do I need to go back? Transient Zionism. There's abortion. 2270. So human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception. From the first moment of his existence, a human being must be recognized as having the rights of a person, among which is the involuntary right of every innocent being to life. So, I don't know if we really want to get into a full discussion into the abolitionists, because I don't know how familiar you are with them, but that
I'm not too familiar.
okay. But that is at least where the evangelicals are. They tend to be a lot more abolitionist type people. Like Dusty Devers has entered something that I would assume is like what Ohio is trying to do, because the pro-life industry doesn't really go after the people who've had abortions. We just kind of stop the abortions from happening in the first place. So, but of course, abortion is a killing of life that we've had in this world, and the church is very much against it compared to the Protestants. So, just anything else you want to throw into that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So yeah, let's see, where are we now? So yeah, that is essentially abortion, though, where evangelicals are trying to stop abortion with the Catholics, and then we have the main line who don't care. So now we have IVF. IVF is again, the Protestants try to get around it by not mentioning it, since it isn't mentioned in the Bible. That for some reason it's more permissible. The only thing that they really worry about is the extra embryos, which we just covered abortion. And the extra embryos either are aborted or tested on or every other.
Yeah, and an embryo is fundamentally a human life. Just look this up on Google. What is the first stage of human life? It's going to be like that embryonic phase. So it is a human, and you're killing it. So.
Yeah. So because even with IVF, you have the sexual act has been perverted, because to get usually the male samples, you have to goon. And then of course you're not because in the sex act or the marital act, I should say, life is created, but that is in accordance with God as the author of the life. We are merely co-authors of life, I think is the title. Co-creators.
I'm not sure what the title
I
is.
think it's maybe co-creators of the life, but obviously IVF perverts the not growth. Crap. Well, where am I thinking of? The birth of children. The Catechism even writes in 2377 where it is morally unacceptable to be using any of the intro fertilization techniques, because later in the next paragraph, children are a gift. And that is what the church has standed on, that they are not owed. That just because you are married, you are not owed a child, because every child is a gift from God. And that hence why in the marital act, he is playing his hand in choosing whether or not life occurs. Then we're talking about the extra embryos. And because those are lives as well, but instead they're being locked away in freezers, they're being killed, or they're being tested on and then essentially killed again. And that is more acceptable among, and that may be acceptable a little bit more with Protestantism than the Catholics, because we understand the marital act requires, or the protection of the marital act is just on our forefront of our minds. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I was moving around a little bit.
But yeah, anything else that you want to throw into the IVF stuff?
Yeah, no, I think it's just a derivative thing. If abortion is wrong, IVF is going to be wrong. And you can't just argue, no, it's not in the Bible. It's not found in the Bible. It doesn't talk about that in the Bible. The Bible also doesn't talk about transgenderism. It doesn't talk about like morality of anything to do with like politics. The Bible doesn't talk about like a lot of things, but you would still regard them as being of moral significance. Like for instance, the Bible doesn't talk about, it doesn't explicitly talk about the Trinity. So does the Trinity not matter? No, I don't think that's the case.
Yep. Okay. Well, I guess then we can move on to the nuclear family. So I wrote this one in more. So I will fully acknowledge that I have read, except the last, I think, 100 pages of Timothy Gordon's book, The Case for Patriarchy, because I was intrigued on what it was. But we have this, like, even today in our culture, we have the patriarchy return, because in our generation, the patriarchy is definitely returning with a bit more ferocity than what was. Excuse me.
Sorry, I don't know what happened to my camera.
Okay.
I'm just gonna fix it. I'll try to fix it while you talk.
Okay. Because there is the hierarchical standard that we have, which is, what is it? We have God. So God's in the top, and even Protestants acknowledge that God is in the top. Then we have the church, which the Protestants don't have, but then it's man, woman, and child. And so the father. So now, to be clear, just because the man is of a higher authority on the hierarchy than the woman, that does not mean that she is any less valued than the man. Catechism 2334 indicates so. But we do have different roles to play, which in our culture is, you could say, a pseudo transgenderism. I think what does Tim call it? Like, not body dysmorphia, but gender dysmorphia, maybe, or something of that ilk.
Gender dysphoria.
Yeah, because a lot of women are trying to, like with the feminists, they are trying to act like men, and you see that even with today's age. And unfortunately, not even Catholics are immune from this issue, because many consider marriage, that the man, unlike being the head, is that in marriage the man and wife are co-chairs of the head. So there is no higher authority, it is just them. But I know Gordon, I think in his book, he talks about that marriage is like having the captain and the first mate. But I would say a different example, because I like how I can manipulate it. I would say marriage isn't like how many feminists, and by feminist I mean first wave feminism. The feminists want to make us where I am a offensive coordinator for a football team and she is my defensive coordinator. And I say defense for home reasons. But marriage should actually be more of a head coach and the defense coordinator, because the head coach controls everything, and then he has his sidekick, and I say that as a nod to the tweet I'm about to show. The sidekick that is my wife, who I don't have, but excuse me. But that is the submission. And the submission typically should be given, I would have thought, there is a price, and that price is to be like with Ephesians 5, which is always read here and there in Mass, especially in Ordo. But it's always funny because they're the blip, there's a section that's bracketed that you don't have to read on those Sundays, and no one tends to want to start it with the women be submissive to your husbands as he is to the church, or something of that ilk. I'm scattered on it right now, but it's always, but like, all men are agreeing to that, and they will, but then the woman also has to agree to her portion as well. And there is no really, there are some women who try to back out of it and try to say, well, he's not worthy of my submission yet, but if you marry him, then just kind of not a, that kind of isn't really up to debate at that point. But and the reason that I said, like, Catholics, we're not immune to it, is because this is from Father Mike Schmitz, and he says, like, she was taken from our side, not our heads, so that she controls us, and our feet that we step on her. But it was funny because Sarah Stock down here had written that we were sidekicks of men, which is not a bad adjective for it. But it just got, a lot of people were not happy with being derived into just a sidekick role. I thought there was something else. Oh yeah. But like, with all this said, like, obviously we talk about submission. That does not necessarily dictate that in this nuclear family structure that we got going on, that does not mean that the man has an authority to control his wife as a tyrant, but neither does she have the power to make him a simp. There's a middle ground of
Mhm.
where I have my authority and I'll exercise my authority, but if there is times where sorry, I think I lost the train. But yeah, I think that's it. I think I covered everything that I kind of wanted to say. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about it previously, the nature of the nuclear family, and the problem is that if you break down the nuclear family, if you break down not only the presence of every person within it, but the natural order of it, not that you want it to be hierarchical in a way that is, what's the word, um, patronizing or oppressive. When you break down that order of it, you get so many issues. And once again, that is one of the fundamental changes that you find
Mhm.
Protestantism being susceptible to, more susceptible to, is the breakdown of that fundamental structure.
Well, and like, this authority that the men have, this also goes into like women pastors and women having a lead in the church, but they're not supposed, that's not their place typically.
Yeah.
Like, even in the workforce, there's obviously some social issues about bringing in half of the working population now. But I know there was one time I talked about why women shouldn't be having some of the jobs, because then that takes away from men who are raising their families. And of course, we live in America, which sometimes it seems like Americans need a two-income family. So that's why daycare then exists. And also just the breakdown of family, because um, like, I know it's a very American concept where it's like, once you're 18, you're out of the house, which I find to be just destructful, because then you didn't have a son, you just had a roommate that you cared for. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's crazy because you think about ancient times, households that was forever,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we used
and it would just get
yeah,
bigger.
and we used to say, I am Eli, son of, what, because we used to have,
Mm-hmm.
because it used, who you were attached to used to be something, but now it's just like, no one
Yeah,
cares. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it's like, with the submission though, it does help in the order of the family, and that helps in what we're talking about next, which is divorce, because with the order in the family, there is no I don't know how to say that. Crap. With the order of that the family is, it becomes harder to break down the structure because it has just been made firm into what it is. Because the man being the leader and the woman being typically in the back seat. So, but yeah, but nothing else for submission. We're just chucking on. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about divorce. So in my looking, I was able to see that not all Protestants believe that divorce is a permanent thing compared to Catholics. Catholics are very marriage is a lifetime requirement. Protestants do believe that. They believe it is a permanent mark, but some are more if you've tried everything but it's not working, then you can. I believe. Oops, sorry, over here. I believe. Oops.
And how is it permanent?
Well, I'm saying that they're believing that marriage is permanent. Sorry, I may have flipped that.
Yeah, well, but it's like if you try everything and it's not working, so you get rid of it. That means it's not permanent.
Mhm. Well, I'm saying that some believe that it's permanent and then others don't. So,
Yeah.
I thought I had another sax. Where is sax? I had another picture, I thought, and I can't find it. So either A, I did not save it, in which case I don't have it. So I guess that is good enough. Maybe I wasn't supposed to show it, but I thought it was something about the lines of divorce rates for Protestants tend to be higher than in Catholic circles. But I will give credit. Protestantism is trying. There is covenantal marriage that has been introduced into some state legislatures. Again, I'm going to throw out Dusty Deaver's name. In Oklahoma, he tried, but then some of the senators were getting on his butt because it wasn't going to allow gays, and so because he had a sworn statement which basically alluded to that you couldn't break up except for because no fault divorce. He was basically going to get rid of that, which obviously is what we're also going to talk about because there is in Catholicism there is no such thing as a divorce, but there is the allowance that you can be civilly divorced, and then whether or not you get sacramentally absolved is taking some time. But if you want to talk about the Protestantism, and then I can afterwards I'll talk about the church briefly, unless you have nothing.
Yeah, I just it's just another one of those things where fundamentally because of the institutional problems that you have within Protestantism, if that higher institution is less strong, then the more fundamental institution of the family is going to be less strong and have that ability to be dissolved more easily.
Yeah. Well, and it's like in the Catechism, so it writes in 2030 or in 2382, it calls it insolvable. So that's like there is nothing you can do. The marriage is locked in, and there is nothing you can do. And if you were to get a divorce, it would be considered a grave offense to the sacrament of matrimony. But also, intriguingly enough, the church is one step ahead of us again and talks about the disorder of the family life, which you were talking about earlier, and that's in 2385. So the church has been very aware that divorce does more harm than anything. Now, again, there are legitimate reasons that there are problems. So because there's you know, uh, you marry a domestic, or no, I wouldn't say the guy's getting at you for a DV. That obviously you would separate yourself from him, and if he cannot reform, I think adultery is also another reason, because typically, so the annulments, so getting this from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, so to get an annulment, it needs to break, I guess, one of these somewhat 5. They say 6, but I combined 1. So I remember because I was in RCA and there was a annulment guy came in and he talked about total, free, fruitful, and faithful. And so you had to break one of those 4 to be getting the annulment. And so I believe if I totaled everything correctly, so it needs to be witnessed by the church and by people. That's just 1. Total, which would be me giving yourselves to each other. Free is a consent was freely given by themselves to marriage given without force. And then you were also free to marry, so you weren't in a prior marriage. Faithful, basically no cheating. And I put virtual or real. So that means even a problem with gooning could be considered a problem, could be considered cheating. And then there's fruitful, which is very apparent to children. But you need, if one of those does not satisfy, then there's a likelihood that you could get an annulment, but the church investigates, got the tribunal to help with that. So I know people call it a Catholic divorce with an annulment, but you're not getting divorced. You're getting, you were never married in the first place is the concept.
Yeah, like if you like marry somebody under the pretense that they're a certain person, but if it turns out they're Jeffrey Dahmer or something,
Yeah.
you know, that's not the person who I married.
Yeah.
You know, type of thing. And so it would have invalidated that marriage because you weren't never actually married that person you ended up being with.
Or even like free. I think there's a certain age requirement because I think they said like girls was 14.
Yeah, or you're forced
Yeah.
into a marriage. It's not a real marriage.
Well, I think that the ages was like boys were 16 and girls were 14. At least I thought I read that on the site, but yeah, but fruitful could also, we could talk about, because we were talking about contraceptions. So it's like if you're using contraceptions during your marriage, well, your marriage was nothing more than a fun-filled night of sex because you never were going to procreate for children. So thus you never really had a marriage, or you had a perversion of what marriage is. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, other than that, again, the church, it does not take divorce as easy as Protestants who just will per se allow it. But yeah.
Yeah, and even that it isn't really divorce.
Mm. Well, yeah, because technically the church has not designated that it is not, because with Protestants, they have nothing to really devalue or desacramentalize, to use that word, the marriage. And thus, if you were to get remarried as a Protestant, you would be committing adultery in our eyes, which adultery is a big no-no.
Yeah, and even Jesus lays that out.
Well, it's like, wasn't it, he wrote it, he because I know when he was talking about it, because they bring that up, I think Protestants bring it up as well, because he was talking about like Moses lets you for reasons, but I have come to like delete that reason. Am I somewhere right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anybody who divorces his wife commits adultery.
Right. So anything else you want to say about divorce? Like, I know it breaks down the natural family again because the nuclear family is now split, and so now it's mom and dads and all that jazz. But
No, I think I'm all right on
that. We're getting there, people. We're almost there. We just really have one more section. I don't know about this one. I might just the next one.
We don't need to like go through an exhaustive list if we feel like we've touched on all the things that matter.
Like,
I think
yeah, we have daycare here, but all I'm gonna say is that in the Catechism 2352, it says it's a parent's job to teach. It's not the kids or the church, because I feel like, especially in our day and world, especially with the Catholic Church. We don't. We feel like there's a education problem with the church. I know Trent, when he was doing the "Is Catholicism Growing" video, he called it the conservative silver bullet, because the trads is that everyone just goes to the TLM, and then the liberals is accepting the homosexuality stuff, or the LGBT related. But I do think it is an education problem, though, because it's just, um, it's taught. Because I thought in Trent, when he was discussing the video, he at one point said, most people are just there to go to mass and then get married, and it's like that's practically it. So the church is just kind of there for some people, which I thought was a very weird relation. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then we got into Zionism. So this is very current then, because of the fact that we are all about to, you and me are about to be drafted into World War III. So, unfortunately, as I said on stream the other time, I'm going to lose my left foot before I join the military and die for Israel. What I found this meme, which I briefly accidentally shared, but this is very in line, though, with some Protestants, where Israel, the country, is very much in the connection of how we are supposed to live a Christian life, and that for some reason the Jews have a special place. To kind of go through, skip. We get into Clavin from the Daily Wire. He was arguing that Christ is King is anti-Semitic, and then that Jews were God's chosen people. But as we are very aware that we are all saved now, and I'm gonna play. I don't want to play Cruises, but I want to play Kirk's because it's only a minute long. Yeah. Nope, there we are. Kirk's is a bit shorter, but yeah, to summarize his Cruises, Cruz was trying to state, well, in the Bible it says, the bless Israel. We bless Israel, and so that means we need to fight for Israel and fight against Iran and send troops over. But I'm gonna play Kirk's, and then if you want to yammer on in, feel free to. But this is Kirk. So Kirk is at the college campus, and he's getting talked to by a Palestinian Christian right now.
How does Israel benefit us as a partner?
Well, first and foremost, you're a Christian.
Yes.
How do we know the Bible is true?
From the land of Israel, Palestine.
That's not Palestine.
You want me to put British Palestine? Does that help?
Well, as a Christian, so are you Armenian Christian?
No, I'm actually Palestinian.
Okay. So what? And you're Christian?
Yes, I'm a Christian.
Okay. Well, praise God. I'm thrilled to hear that. So, but I think you can acknowledge that we as Christians have to honor the Jews. Do you believe that?
I think we should honor everyone. People are people at the end of the day.
But in our scriptures, it does say that we should bless the Jews. That Genesis 12:3, bless those. I will bless those descendants that bless me. And we have a covenant with Israel. Do you share that as a Christian, that belief?
Okay, so obviously some very odd theology from the Protestants. So do you want to talk about why that practice in Protestantism, because that is a evangelical approach, I would think, because I think Kirk is a non-denominational, so that should be under their camp, I would believe.
Yeah, I just don't know. They make this up because they just take things in the Bible that are completely out of context and then just generate whatever to justify their Zionism from it, and it just doesn't make any sense. You can't just like take random comments in the Bible about Judaism and somehow about the covenant when because he isn't talking to modern audiences. He isn't talking to the Gentiles who've been grafted into the tree in those verses, it's just God talking about either He is honoring them, or it's like an internal thing. The paradigm just completely shifts with the new covenant. So that just makes no sense.
Mhm.
Your justification for it is just
Mhm.
completely like it's not there.
Well, and then you would have to like, because they talk about that they are the chosen people. Then what is the Gentiles then? Are we not the chosen people anymore? And thus, what is the point in believing in the faith or believing in the gospel? Because if we are not the chosen, then what is our shtick? Um, so, because especially like I think it's in Acts, isn't it? Where, or is it, or does Paul write about it? But I thought someone writes something more or less about that Jew and Gentile are now free.
I'm not sure
Okay.
what you're referring to.
Okay, that's fine. I meant to look it up.
There is no distinguish between Jew and Gentile.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not recalling where
Okay.
that's from.
I know it's in the New Testament. I just don't know. It's Acts back somewhere in there, but we're about to get pushed probably into another war potentially. But it's interesting that um that the Catechism also does write about war, and it does talk about general warfare in 2307 and 2308, which I guess I can go find. But it does allow while I'm finding this, it does allow a the quote that is on Twitter today is "I'm not dying for Israel," and that is perfectly allowed because the church does allow a conscience, even if it goes against the state. You have a conscience to say no. Was it 2307? I'm way back. There we are. Yeah, here we are. Zionism. So in the general war, though, it says avoiding war before 2307. The fifth commandment forbids the intentional destruction of human life. Well, there you go. There's a lot. The church has urged everyone to prayer and to action so that the divine goodness may free us from the ancient bondage of war. And then the first line of 2308, though, it says all citizens and all governments are obligated to work for the avoidance of war. So obviously what had happened recently with Israel sending a preeminent strike against Iran, and now Iran is, obviously seeking vengeance, which we could talk about whether or not they should be doing that too. But it is just intriguing, though, that we have Protestants who are willing to go to war for a nation, but not necessarily all people, right? Because there's worse evils than probably Iran. China is obviously our worst competitor in trade, and then there's Russia. So, but anyways, so I don't know if you have any prior thoughts.
No, I don't think so. I think it's just a completely unfounded belief.
Yep. Yeah, it's a very Protestant belief. Even on Twitter, you can tell because like it's all the Catholics are very. We're not doing this. But some Protestants are also like, rejecting it as well. But so yeah. But other than that, I guess we can conclude. So you know, we obviously started this question with can Protestantism save America, and we're running into this problem now because based on what you have said and based on what the church has been alluding to, would you agree then that the church is the only way for America to be saved from some of this degeneracy that has been plaguing us for decades?
I would say so. I just don't think that there's anything else which is going to be a suitable long term just have the capacity to persist.
Mhm. So you believe that the church is the only way, but even if the Protestants decided to make something better in the hopes of turning around, you still don't think that the Protestantism can do that?
No, because I think that there's just fundamentally
Mm.
a problem with the way that Protestantism functions.
Okay. And so if the world is how it is, so the solution would then be that everyone needs to be joining RCA this summer, go to inquiry sessions, and then get baptized by Easter and work towards becoming a very saint-like person. No?
I would say so.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, I think that's really just it. Just ending thoughts. So, um, obviously we worked through a lot of issues that are plaguing our country. Some of them are being worked on. Like I know when we talked about transgenderism, Matt Walsh's or the Tennessee law got passed by the Supreme Court, so now there's no minors getting transgender care or gender. What is it? Gender affirming care anymore. So that's a win for us. However, there tends to be in the Republican Party, there's the don't touch the kids mentality, but they're okay with the adults being touched. And so now we're gonna have to slowly peel it back. And even with abortion has been plaguing us for what 60 some odd years now. So we need to work a bit harder. If all we did was kill one dragon to spawn out a 50-headed hydra, that we don't even have half of it killed. So that's also a bummer.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think it's just something we have to work to, and we have to do it in charity and love, even if I still once again, I still love my Protestant brothers and sisters, and I think ultimately we should work towards unity and charity with one another. And so, any of the critiques I have with the in Protestant institutions is by no means a critique of any individual person. It's just out of love for God and for neighbor.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. Well, I think that's it then, unless there's anything anyone wants to add to this. Let's see. Was there anything? I saw it light up a bit. We saw that. So okay. Yes. Yes. And I wouldn't say Kirk is an idiot. I would say I don't find him the best. I will at least say that, Jimmy. Hi, Haley. I love how she came in at the last time. But or unless she's been here, in which case, but yeah. But other than that, I think we've covered it. I'm hoping that we made the right arguments to answer the question of whether or not it can. I think both of us can agree that Protestantism will not be able to save America because of as you say, the institutional problems and just the disunity within Protestantism, and compared to the Catholics who believe in a certain institutional stuff. And yeah, and like this isn't all of it either. There's more to that. Because there's what theology of the body is just like one source, and then there's other stuff I assume that you're more versed in.
Yeah, it's like a bunch of issues, but I think we covered most of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I wanted to talk about capitalism at one point, but I got a little late on it. But that may be a different video I'll just do. But yeah.
I think it should be.
Yeah. But this covers a lot of it. like this covers a lot of the just at least the traditional evils, and then we can get specifics. But yeah, I'm hoping that everyone enjoyed the 2 hours of us yammering on about if Protestantism can save America. We encourage everyone to definitely research what we have said, so it's not just just what we have told you. I know I've said a few things during so where you can find it, not necessarily the links. But yeah, other than that, I'd like to thank Just a Catholic for showing up one more time. He's been a great helper on the channel. Definitely great time to have talking with you tonight. And yeah, if you want to say anything to the people to end it up, let me know.
Oh, I think we covered it all. Hope you all have a good evening.
Okie day. Well, if that be the case, I'm going to remind everyone one more time, because I am a YouTuber. Please hit the big red button for us, for both Just a Catholic and myself. And it typically says subscribe in white lettering. If you can give a thumbs up, that'd be nice for us. If you're going to give a thumbs down, at least write a comment. And yeah, I'm on Twitter as well, so please follow me there. But yeah, and if you're in District 6 of Oklahoma, definitely keep an eye out. But yeah, again, I'd like to thank Just a Catholic for showing up tonight, an hour earlier than the scheduled stream I usually do today. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think I will end the stream then. Peace to all of you.